Well, for those of you who were here last week, you may remember that I made some mention about this coming year. And specifically, I had a strong sense and discerned it with others that the Lord was saying to me that 2019 is going to be our best year yet. And again, this is not hype. I absolutely hate hype. It really rubs me the wrong way. All I want is the real Jesus. I do not want any religious fluff. And that's why I don't like to hype people up on big grandiose things. But I really do honestly believe that the Lord said 2019 is going to be our best year yet. And that doesn't mean that this year is going to be free of suffering or challenge. And it doesn't mean that we're going to have some sort of big winning streak where just like everything goes right and oh, look, I'm rich and beautiful, like everything just happens all perfect. No. In fact, I think we're going to face a lot of challenges and we're going to walk through some difficult stuff. But what's going to make 2019 our best year yet is who we're going to become. And I believe that's the opportunity that the Lord is placing before us, and He's inviting us into it. It's all about who we can become. So I really do believe that this will be our best year with how we're going to dig deeper into Jesus, into receiving all that He gives, into going where He leads and just taking off with it. And I do believe in the process. We're gonna know Him more. We're gonna know Him deeper, and we're gonna become more like Him. And we are going to receive what He gives, which is no less than life from the dead. And that is good news, my friends. And so that's kind of the backdrop a little bit to all that we're doing this year, and particularly right now. As part of this process, this morning we're pressing on with our teaching series on wisdom, for which I'm filled with tremendous anticipation. I think the Lord's going to be speaking to us. I believe that God will use His wisdom that He's given us in His Word to bring healing to us, to bring health to us, to bring flourishing to each of our lives. Wisdom, as some might think, is not some sort of lofty ivory tower, pie-in-the-sky philosophy. Wisdom is intensely practical, especially when we look at what the Scripture has to say. It is intensely practical. Wisdom is about the things of everyday life. Wisdom is about how to live a life that brings blessing instead of a curse. Wisdom is about finding the path to joy and fulfillment, the path to the full and abundant life that Jesus promises. So in this process, we're seeking God's wisdom that we might know and experience His ultimate intent for each of us since the creation of the world. To live, to thrive, to experience His blessing. Well, today we're going to talk about a little bit of a hot topic and seek some of God's wisdom. And we're going to talk about the use and the proper place of technology in our lives. By technology, I want to zero in more specifically to electronic devices like television, video games, entertainment kind of stuff, but even more so, what really is affecting us is our mobile devices. That's a big one. And then our computers that we have, either our laptops that we take everywhere or desktops at home and so forth. And there's a lot that could be said about this topic, but we only have so much time. So I'm going to just narrow it down to a few things that we see in Scripture that I believe are very relevant. But the big question in all of this is, how can we be wise? How can we walk with godly wisdom with technology? And this morning, I'm going to be pulling from a few ideas from a great book by Andy Crouch called The Tech-Wise Family, Everyday Steps for Putting Technology in Its Proper Place. And I would, even though I'm going to just lightly touch on a few things in this book, I would highly recommend for every individual, and especially for parents and grandparents, to check out this book. It's deep, starkly practical, and a good, easy read. And I think, especially for this really important and hot issue, If you can't, it's like $16.50 on Amazon. If you can't afford that and you would actually read it for your family, for the health of your family, I'll pay for it. Just talk to me. I'm dead serious. That's how important I believe that this issue is, and that this is a resource that would be very helpful for you. So there you go. So if you like, I'll get that for you. Anyways. So this topic is important to me as I've had a long personal journey with technology and have learned some pretty hard lessons myself. So part of this preaching and teaching I'm doing this morning is actually to myself. There's a few things that I need to relearn and some wisdom that I need to re-anchor myself in. I was born in 1974, which is the first generation that had access to the first home personal computers. Oh, there she is. Isn't she pretty? I can see my sister just smiling. Oh, I remember that. That computer's about 35 years old. So when I was about 10 or 11, I saved up my own money from like washing cars, mowing lawns, doing laundry, anything I could do to buy that computer. Because I just so wanted one. And it's amazing 64K of RAM. Whoa. I know, it was mind-blowing. How can a device have so much power? And now I think this clicker for the PowerPoint has more power than that computer, but so I started programming on that thing, started learning basic language, and then I played way too many video games, and anyways, ever since I was able to get my hands on this amazing piece of technology, I've been constantly discovering the limits of new technology, of different things that would come out, especially when it came to computerized devices or handheld devices, and especially when it came to music and media applications, because obviously I have a background in music and education, so I put a lot of focus there. And I was also a part of some of the earliest social networks, just as this stuff was being born, and they're just kind of figuring out how this stuff works. So some of you might remember AOL, America Online, and the AOL Instant Messenger, or MSN network that Microsoft put out, or ICQ. Anybody remember that thing? Oh, there we go. There we go. Some of these early things, I was right on top of that, connecting with friends. Hey, how are you? Send them a little picture of an ice cream cone. Ding, it was fun to kind of learn this stuff and just to figure it out, and I was right in there. So I've learned a lot about the proper place of technology in our lives, partly through receiving some wisdom from others, like my mother. Get off that thing or your eyes are going to turn square. But mostly by learning hard lessons in terms of goofing it up. And I say this with all sincerity, that many of my life's big regrets, like the biggest regrets, have to do with the misuse of technology. More specifically, all the time and the opportunities that I've stolen from myself and from my family and my friends, and wasted it on pretty much meaningless, profitless garbage that did me no good, or also with just the over-availability that I've experienced with just what these devices can do and so forth. It's been some of my biggest life's regrets with that. And my biggest regret as a parent is not exercising more wisdom. Part of it is this stuff was new. We just didn't know. But my biggest regret as a parent is not exercising more wisdom when it came to choices that I've made with how I've let my kids use technology. And in some cases, what I taught my kids in terms of using technology, and what I modeled for them with some of my overusage. Now, my kids also were some lucky ones where they were starting their teen years at the advent of the iPhone and the smartphone So they kind of came into that era fresh when all this was completely new. None of us knew what this was going to be, where it would go. And so here my kids are in there right in the thick of that and so forth. And so, yeah, we learned a lot of hard lessons about this stuff as a family. And I don't know about you guys, but you probably relate to some of that yourselves in terms of some of the learning that we've had with some of these things. And I know that I'm far from alone, or we're far from alone in our concerns and regrets with regards to technology, both personally and as a parent. In a series of surveys done by Barna Research Group, studying this, they found several pronounced phenomena. Most parents believe that it is more complicated to raise kids today than when they were kids. If we look at the graph there, that we're looking at about 77% of people would agree with that statement, either strongly or somewhat. Now, why do they think parenting is more difficult? Technology and social media top the list by a significant margin. A significant margin. And the runner-up, The World is a More Dangerous Place, also, if you analyze it a little bit more, has a little bit to do with just the dangers of technology and some of the predation and the bullying and some of the filth that's available in technology and so forth. So this is a huge, huge issue for a lot of people. Now the question, I think I got it there, yeah. As they dug further into it, they asked questions like, what is it that makes so technology as a parent? And there's a number of things that parents from across America have responded and have clearly identified, quite strongly identified as challenges. Like balancing physical activity with online activity, limiting children's time and use of technology, filtering content that our children watch, read, or play, what my children will be exposed to by friends, finding family time without technology, monitoring, I misspelled that there, but worrying about what my children see on social media, access to pornography, which is extremely pervasive and everywhere on the internet, keeping up to date with what tech or social media my children are using, modeling how to use tech well for my children, online bullying and peer pressure on children, my children sexting or sending inappropriate messages. So this is what parents are responding and are finding challenging in our world today. Now, when asked about the most challenging things about family life and raising children, again, we see that there's 4 big things that parents identify, and right in there and about equal value is monitoring technology and social media use. This is what families are finding one of the most difficult things about family life and raising children. So again, this is a huge, huge issue for people all across the board. Well, to be clear, as we talk about technology, technology isn't bad. It's not inherently evil. There's nothing wrong with it. It actually can make our life a whole lot easier. When these same folks are asked, okay, what ways has technology actually genuinely made your life easier? There's a number of great responses, like we have access to more information. We're more connected to our friends and family, especially those who are in different cities and so forth. We're better informed about the world. We have our daily activities are more convenient. We can do our jobs better. We're more productive. So there are some benefits to all these little devices that we have and so forth. It's not that they're inherently bad or so forth, but without wisdom, technology can also make our life a whole lot harder. So also asking, in the survey, in what ways has technology made your life more difficult? We find that without wisdom, we can waste a lot of time. A lot of people identified with that strongly. And that we become, in general, a lot more distracted. I wonder what the stats on that would be for drivers. I was almost killed about 4 years ago by someone texting on their cell phone. They narrowly missed me. They're driving about 80K. They narrowly missed me by about 12 inches. So anyways. So we got all sorts of things that where technology, people strongly identify with how it makes our lives more difficult. So part of the challenge that we face here with technology and all these devices, what I kind of alluded to earlier, is that the pace of technological change is so fast that it's surpassed our capacity to even develop enough wisdom to handle it. Like some of this stuff is so new and it comes out so fast and the capabilities keep advancing and changing that we're not even sure really what this stuff is, what we're dealing with here, never mind how to deal with it. So again, the big question is, how can we be wise and walk with godly wisdom with technology? Because if we're not careful, as we are probably already know from our personal experience, but we can even see from data that's being gathered, if we're not careful, technology will overwhelm us with all of its default settings, and it will take over our lives, and it will stunt our growth in ways that really matter. There's actually quite a bit of research out there, and it's continuing to come in just in terms of the effect of devices and of various forms of media and so forth on our children and on their capacity to actually grow and develop. And some of the results that are coming out are quite shocking. These devices are actually rewiring our brains. They're creating certain neural pathways that normally haven't been there before. And certain pathways that we used to be strong in are no longer there. So it's very, very interesting with how it changes some things that really, really matter. Proverbs 14. The wisdom of the prudent is to discern his way, but the folly of fools misleads. The wise discern their way forward, proactively seeking good, seeking those things that make life better and not allowing lesser things to take over. So we're seeking, like where did God create blessing in the system and how can we obtain it? As human beings made in the image of God, we are given the gift of life. We are born to become. And as image bearers, we have immense God-given potential inside of each of us. But we must grow into this potential. We must be formed into people of mature character, formed into people of wisdom, formed into people of courage. And the only way this formation happens, the good way, is with other people. We are formed in community. Part of what we do here together with one another is we form one another by our very presence and the way that we interact with one another, the things that we do. We're formed in community, but we're most profoundly formed in family. Family is that place where really we can know one another with real depth, and we can be ourselves known. And within community, and especially family, there's feedback mechanisms within our interactions where we can learn that, hey, that's not cool, or, oh, that was awesome. There's either the pushback or the affirmation or so forth. So we can learn and grow in character and wisdom and so forth. We are formed in community and formed in family. Family is really meant for the forming of persons. We form our children. We form our children for their flourishing. Family is meant to be a training ground where we learn wisdom for life ahead. so that by the time we're adults and we leave home, we're equipped and capable to succeed and to thrive. Well, being wise and proactively seeking what is good, we make it our goal to develop mature character, to acquire wisdom and courage for ourselves and for our kids. And we make it our goal to commit ourselves to what life is really about. This means committing ourselves to relationship. This means committing ourselves to a relationship that is intentionally formational. This is especially important if we have kids or grandkids. We are being intentional about how they are formed and into what they are being formed. So you might be thinking, okay, dude, like what does all this have to do with technology? Here's the thing. Technology is brilliant, and it's just this remarkable expression of human creativity. But technology at its best is neutral in the formation of people who can create and cultivate what we're meant to do. And yes, we have some exceptions, like some educational programs that are out there, or neat things that you can get on your iPhone, like Daily Audio Bible, that can help you out and so forth. But for the most part, our tech devices most often are distracting us, disrupting us, displacing us from the real work of becoming people like character. They're not doing anything to form us. And at their very worst, our devices and our technology can do some very, very serious damage. We're finding out that we can incur a lot of mental damage. There's spiritual damage with some of the things that we can see on there. And even physical damage with some of the ways we can treat technology. There are people who are having carpal tunnel with their thumbs from all their texting and so forth. These things can be very damaging. So when we put tech devices in our own hands or in the hands of our children, we need to ask, how is this specific technology forming me or my child? Because every habit that we engage in, every regular practice, forms us. It forms something inside of us. So we need to ask, if we're wise, how is this regular practice, how is this habit forming us? Who is forming us behind there? And what are we being formed into? And at the end of it, we need to ask those questions and then choose wisely. Think about what habits might be formed and where they might lead and what they might cultivate in our hearts. Now, I fully get the issue of parents and grandparents needing some space and allowing tech devices to secure some temporary peace. I've used the electronic babysitter more than once, more than twice. Karis and I were just talking about this week, is that we believe that we've seen the Disney movie Aladdin about 500 times. And so much so that we actually wore out the VHS tape. So guilty. Okay, I understand that issue and so forth. But when it comes to practices like that, it's good to ask questions like, how often am I doing this? And what am I exposing them to? And am I using this as an easy way out because parenting is hard? Am I just using this as a tool to just pacify them so that I can get something for me? Is this just an easy option to soothe their boredom? Some pretty tough questions. Because when it comes especially to parenting, we're not here to make life easier for our kids. We're here to make it better. But some of the demand that can be trained into them through just some of the habits that are formed with some of the technology kind of leads them towards the easy path rather than the path that actually will see some improvement. or some growth, because our devices ask very little of us. They ask very little of our kids. They actually, in many cases, develop little or no skill. And they end up forming these habits of seeking empty and instant gratification. I was fascinated learning a few things. I was helping my daughter Taylor on a social studies project that she did in grade 10, talking about the effects of social media on her peer group for high school students. And it was interesting to read. I came across this article from a former executive of Apple Computer, a former executive of Google, and a former CEO of BlackBerry. And all of these executives had admitted, and there's a lot of other places you can find the same information, that tech companies and application developers have been hiring behavioral psychologists and clinical psychologists so that they can program things in such a way that you actually do get instant gratification and you get a dopamine hit, so that you get drawn back to use it more and more and more. Because the more you use the application, the more advertising gets seen and the more money they make. And so there was a lot of work put in drawing us more and more and deeper into these applications. There is a reason why when you have your Facebook notification that the little bell is blue, but when the notification comes up, ding, what do you see? A bright red letter. That is intentional to trigger something. It's intentional to trigger anxiety in you and me that, oh, I need to check that, to draw me in, to keep the usage and to keep the cycle going and going and going, and so forth. So there are all sorts of habits that are actually being formed towards empty and instant gratification, getting us even into cycles of technological addiction, which is a big thing now, but particularly within the kids, of always needing that hit, always needing that gratification, because they're always getting that hit in the way their games are programmed, in the way their applications are programmed. Formation, healthy formation of a person, of a child, isn't about instant gratification. It's about work. It's about struggle. It's about learning. It's about digging into something. Like when our kids do sports, they got to work for that soccer goal. You're not going to score if you don't run, and if you don't put in that effort. And same with the arts. It takes patience, and it takes careful attention to detail to draw that perfect picture. Or even playing board games, you have to engage your brain to think about various strategies and look at the long game. Or kids who love reading, where it really engages their imagination as they dig deeper into a book. Or for myself, when I was a kid, I loved to make science experiments in the kitchen and try and blow things up. Like I did the whole baking soda and vinegar thing probably 1,000 times, but the older I got, I really wanted to see things blow up. And I won't tell you quite what happened there, but I don't want to incriminate myself or my brother. But we made some things that went boom. But that requires work, and it requires struggle, and it requires creativity to see that goal. And so when we're doing these kind of activities too, even doing things that include each other, that we can do it together, we're even forming relational skills that are lacking when we're so glued to our devices. So here, when it comes to formation, one of Crouch's biggest things in his book is allow your kids to see you doing something worth admiring if you want to help form them. Inspire them with what you're doing. Inspire them with your lifestyle. Inspire them with your pursuit of growth and development. One of our favorites. Train children in the right way, and when they're old, they will not stray. This is so important when it comes to even how we think about how we use devices or technology in our home. How are we forming them? How are we forming us? All right, moving on. As we read the Gospels, we see that when Jesus was with people, he was engaged. He was present. He was fully there with those with whom he was interacting. Never once do I see Jesus in the Gospels like, oh, hold on here a second. Oh, look at that, the weather. Yeah, that's pretty neat. No, he was there. He was present with people in a deep and a profound way. And then when he was done, he went to be alone so that he didn't need to be present. But when he was with people, he was present and engaged. And I think it's even interesting that one of the names that we find in Scripture for Jesus is about his being present. Emmanuel, God with us. He's even revealed to us as one who is present. Now, if you were critically sick or even on your deathbed, what would you prefer? Your friends or family send you a little Facebook message with an emoji, maybe one of those new smiley faces? Or would you like a FaceTime call where you can, hey, I can kind of see your face there a little bit and whatnot? Or would you like them to be there at your bedside, to hold your hand, where you can feel their warmth, where you can interact face to face, where you can hear the careful intonations of voices, where you can receive the care and the little details in your room? Devices, social media are a poor substitute for face-to-face relationship. Yet in many cases we end up doing that. They are incapable of meeting basic human needs. And because of that, we find, interestingly, in the data that people report increased loneliness with increased social media activity. That thing, that technology that's supposed to connect us is actually disconnecting us. There's no substitute for being physically present. There's something absolutely irreplaceable about it. And that's for any circumstance, whether it be for celebrations or for consolations. Because being physically present communicates love and interest and care and intimacy that just cannot be done any other way. Now, of course, it's totally possible to be physically present and not actually be present, which is kind of the other side of the issue here. And you may have noticed that our tech devices have a way of kind of taking us over and commanding our attention and even our devotion and making us absent from one another, even though we're right there. I mean, sure, you've all seen the all too familiar scene in a restaurant where a couple is out on a date, and what are they doing the whole date? Scrolling through Facebook and then Instagram. It's just like, how romantic, It's like, why are you, like, I get, there's good food, but like, why are you here together? What's the point of this? Or even at some dinner tables, maybe your family does this, where, you're eating dinner, it's like, oh yeah, blah, 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 and you start scrolling through and you're disengaged. That lack of presence communicates what to those that you're with? Disrespect, disinterest, not valued. Have you experienced that before? Being out, being somewhere, and there's somebody where it's truly not critical. Like, I get it, if you're a medical doctor or you're waiting for a baby to be born, by all means, have your phone on. But it doesn't feel good, does it? It makes sense not to do that to other people, too. And in the context of our families, what does that present absence teach our kids? Yeah, especially as we're looking at forming them, what does it teach our kids? Not only about their value, but how they treat others. So we can help form our friends and our kids by modeling healthy uses and boundaries with our technology devices, particularly being present. Being present with one another in those social moments. Like meals or when we're in the car. Using that time where we're together in a small confined space to actually relate to one another instead of getting lost in our phones. Or at special functions or whatnot, like birthday parties, or those family times where you're just lounging around and just kind of having family conversations. Like, actually be there for those conversations and follow them through. Next, piece of wisdom from Scripture. Proverbs 24, by wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. One of the more profound points of wisdom in the Scripture is the remembering of the Sabbath. Sabbath rest is a gift. It's designed for our health and well-being. And in all areas of our life, we need to have rhythms of rest to remain healthy. And this includes our use of technology, especially with the high level of stimulus that's available within these devices. So tech wisdom includes tech Sabbaths. And this can happen in a number of different ways to help promote our health. In Crouch's book, Tech-Wise Family, he has a number of suggestions that are just absolutely awesome to help us to remember the Sabbath, even with these devices that seem to cross all sorts of time boundaries in some pretty gnarly ways. So that will include having different hours of the day where you choose, I will not use my device or my computer or anything like that during these hours of the day. And it may even include one day a week where we turn it off. And we're free. And in his family, they even do it for a week or two of the year where they actually take a technology vacation. But primarily, he advocates for a daily rhythm where devices need to go to sleep before we do. And research now is showing, especially medical research, that we shouldn't use a device, within an hour before bed because the frequency of the light waves that actually come off our devices, in the blue spectrum, actually stimulates our brain to be awake, and we can have trouble sleeping if we use our devices too close to bed or use our devices in bed. Similarly, Crouch says, devices need to wake up long after we do. So have a morning routine that actually doesn't include scrolling through emails or Facebook or whatnot, and all these kind of things that can actually end up raising anxiety levels and so forth. So have a daily rhythm of when we just will not use them. And then, of course, there are other rhythms, other Sabbath rhythms that you can adopt personally and as a family. We can decide when we will use technology and when we won't. So there might be things, I know a number of you have used Lent as a reason to actually fast from technology or from media or other general fasts or different kinds of technology vacations. The point is this, particularly with Sabbath and Sabbath rhythms, that the path forward to freedom from the slavery that we experience so often to these devices is to choose disciplines. Choose remembering the Sabbath. Choose to remember a tech Sabbath. The notifications on these things always try to interrupt at all times. But the discipline of rest is our way of saying no. And in that way, we can come into a place of health. Speaking of my daughter's school assignment, she actually did an experiment with taking Sabbath breaks from devices. And she noticed that when she took her Sabbath break from her device, it's like, I feel better. My mood is improved, and just all sorts of positive effects and so forth. It's like, there's actually something to this. And it was a real addition to her little research project. And what we find in studies in the science is that there is a connection between frequent and compulsive device usage and anxiety and depression. And the data is becoming more and more significant, partly because of the way these things are coded, but also because of the way that we use them without rest. So we can mitigate all sorts of problems by giving it a rest, giving our technology a Sabbath. All right, wrapping it up here. The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. Here's the thing that we've already talked about, and things that I'm sure everybody here knows all too well, is that technology and digital media are not benevolent. Even some seemingly good applications have a bit of a other side to them. Even things that we use commonly in every day, like Facebook. Do you know the amount of data that they mine and have on you? Data metrics people who are behind some of the engine of these popular applications tell us that they oh, the irony. I love it. They tell us that they have so much data on us from tracking all of our online behavior that they psychologically profile us to the point where they know us better than we know us. They know us better than any of our family or our friends know us. And then they sell this data metric information to other companies to use it for advertising and to exploit us. And that's even with the more benevolent applications, or supposedly benevolent ones. And then, of course, we know things like there are a lot of online predators out there. There is, pornography is a massive, massive social problem with massive negative effects that I don't think I even need to go into right now. But we're at the point now where we're reaching a last statistic I looked at. It's up to 65% now of all men are regularly viewing pornography because it's so available on the internet. And with women, we're getting close to the 25% mark who are now regularly viewing pornography all the time on the internet. And it is so easily accessible. And of course, there are all sorts of other very morally uncool things that are also out there too. And there's all sorts of time boundaries that are being violated. And there's just a myriad of malevolent temptations out there that are present within technology. So we can be wise by setting ourselves up to avoid vulnerable situations, to avoid temptations so that it's not a problem because all of this garbage is out there. So there's a few things that we can do. See, these are some of the things that we do in our house, and some of the things that Crouch suggests in his book is that we use technology in the same room as everyone else in plain sight. So when I'm working on my computer or something like that, 99% of the time I'm working in the kitchen, on the table, in plain view of everyone else. The only time I'll move somewhere else is when the kids are watching a loud movie, and it's just like, even with my headphones on, I can't tune it out. But everyone in the same room as everyone else in plain sight, and we don't use technology alone in a bedroom or a basement out of sight where there could be temptation or vulnerabilities. And at night when everyone is heading to bed, all technology goes to bed. The devices go to bed in a common area, like a living room, where we all plug them in there so that we're not even tempted. We don't have access to them. They're all there in a place where we can all see and all monitor and all keep ourselves accountable. It's like, hey, I noticed your phone wasn't plugged in here. What's the deal? It's like, oh, yeah. Next, using parent controls on all kids' devices or even devices of adults where there's been problems. So if you have kids where you have devices, it's extremely, I can't emphasize this enough because of so many of the stories that I've heard. It is extremely important to enable parent controls on those devices because all of that malevolent stuff out there is so easily accessible like that. And if you don't have parent controls on those devices, it's not if, but when your kids will run into something that you really, really won't want them to see. And it will happen a lot faster than you think. All devices enable parent controls. That's wisdom. Even if your kids are trustworthy and of good character, there's so much stuff out there, they will run into it. Put on the parent controls. And for adults too, if you're one of those people in that statistic that do struggle with things like internet pornography or whatnot, enable the same controls even on your own accounts and so forth. Or use a service like OpenDNS, where there's actual constant tracking so your family can see what have you been doing online, what have you been doing on your devices, things like that. Lastly, share device passwords to stay accountable for what you're doing with your device. In our family, we all have the same password on our phones and whatnot, just so that at any time, if we ever need to, or if there's any question, we can pick up and just, hey, what have you been up to? For that kind of accountability. And this is the kind of thing that helps to avoid vulnerable situations and so forth. Now, lastly, and without mention, where are we here? A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing a personal opinion. Now, I wonder where that could possibly apply. I don't know. I think I'll just allow the Bible to speak for itself in terms of how we behave online. Speaking of keeping ourselves accountable. All right. I know that all of this talk about technology and being wise with technology can seem intimidating and even kind of daunting to move forward. But here's the deal. We know that it's an issue, so we can approach the Lord and we can pray for wisdom. We know that we need wisdom and understanding as we walk this out for ourselves, for our families. And in all of it, we know that the Lord is rich in wisdom and He is happy to share His wisdom with us. So we look to Him because with all of these new things that keep coming up, in Him is the wisdom that we need to deal with it. If we really look at the right issues, in Him we can learn to navigate anything. Anything. He has given us all that we need. So we look to Jesus in all of these circumstances, and we follow Him into the wise choices when it comes to these kind of obstacles.